morning. Welcome to day 5 of Truth and Reconciliation Week. My name is Kate. I'm with RBC, and I'll be helping host today. And I'm so thrilled to get to introduce our speaker. Imelda Ablasomwes Purley is a member of St. Mary's First Nation and the elder in residence at Chief Harold Sapieha Memorial Elementary School. We are so pleased to welcome you to this session, Reconciliation as Conveyed in Indigenous Languages.
Thank you, Kate. Well, I was just giving gratitude to Kate for the introduction. And Ablasomwes is my traditional name. But as a day school survivor, I wasn't allowed to use that name. As we know, our names were not allowed to be used and we were given English names. And so it's been just recently when I've started to use my name without shame and use an Ablasomwes. It means moon of the whirling wind. And it has to do with the 13 moons. It's actually one of the moons. It's January. So that's my birth moon. And so identity has everything to do with what reconciliation is symbolizing. An identity is when we take people's names away or we change place names. For example, in our territory here on the East Coast, in the Wabanaki territory, our river Wulastuk is its first name, but it's been renamed St. John. So what happens is, how do I explain as an elder to the children, you're not St. John River children. You belong to Wulastuk, the traditional name, which means beautiful and bountiful river. So you're descendants of the people of the river. And so what we have to do right now is we're trying to reclaim that as part of the TRC calls to action is to recognize the original place names that have been changed through the newcomers. It's such a important part of our identity is to make sure that we connect to our earth, connect to our land, connect to our waterways, and connect to our territories. So and in our territory, we have unceded, unsurrendered territory of the people of the beautiful and bountiful river, as well as the Mi'kmaq and the Passamaquoddies, which we share in our area here. What I wanted to talk about today is language, because one of the things that we're hoping TRC calls to action will do would be to restore, what's been taken. And one of the things that have been taken and attacked is our languages. French and English are very well legislated and protected, funded, so that they never have to worry about language materials being, to be produced. Whereas for our Indigenous languages, we come from an oral tradition, but that doesn't mean we can't have the materials to be able to make sure that our languages are protected as well. And so one of the things when we talk about reconciliation, in my former role as elder in residence at the University of New Brunswick, the former president asked, how would you translate reconciliation? And I said, in our language, reconciliation is actually a verb. It's not a noun. And so to be translated, it would be reconciliation. And so the word that we use is bilui, which is changing, dahas, attitudes or minds, waus, to walk the talk of that changed attitude, wagan is towards truth. And truth precedes reconciliation. And so one of the recommendations is we have to look to the past. And in the past is some painful memories. And yes, we have to talk about those painful memories because we can't move forward without touching our past. And as painful as our past is, we have to admit that truth does hurt, but truth has to tell a story. And from that pain is trying to recover from language loss, trying to recover from cultural loss. All the ceremonies that were our ways of living, our ways of knowing, our ways of being, all of those were attacked and outlawed and punishable by law. And so, how do we try to rise above that pain that we were considered not to be, not to be safe not to be culturally safe? And culturally safe is the ultimate goal that we want reconciliation to do. I've been a teacher for over 30 years, and I remember being a high school teacher, and I remember we used to have awareness days, Native awareness days. And I used to tell the audience, geez, how come we get one day, but non-Indigenous people get 364 days to celebrate their culture? One day won't be enough for the non-Indigenous people to learn about our culture. So we need to make this an everyday occurrence. We have a traditional right to our culture as well. And so I've been working very hard with other elders to make sure that the curriculum in our schools tells our stories, painful as it may be. But we don't just have painful stories, we have amazing survival stories as well. And so in our territory here, we're really trying to promote starting to just put treaty education into our curriculum. I know out west, you've been very fortunate to have that support of your government that's always said, yes, treaty education has to be in the school curriculum for everybody to learn, not just for Indigenous people, because the word treaty making in our language is kjilagodimag, which means sacred relationship. And sacred relationship is keeping the promise to each other that we will live in, unity within diversity. That's a hard truth to try to maintain, and that's what we're asking for in this reconciliation, that changing of attitudes. And the reason the attitudes have been negative against my people is because it's not in the schools. Just yesterday, when we were doing a session, a commemoration ceremony at the university, there were people that never heard any stories from our residential school survivors. They didn't realize that there was even residential schools. So imagine here in 2021, we're still telling stories that people have never heard before. And why is that? And so what we want to promote is that idea of language. So what we did yesterday at our university, we gave out orange hearts. We had the audience listen to residential school stories from survivors. We told stories of, my own family. I was spared from going to residential school because at the young age of 7, the Indian agent came to get my brother and I, and our maternal grandmother was watching all of us grandchildren. And we happened to be the two that were at home. And Indian agent told my grandmother she was too old to be watching grandchildren, that why don't she allow the grandchildren to be, taken to a wonderful school, he said. Well, my brother ran away. He was only 5. He ran away and he ran to the woods, but they did catch him, and we didn't see him for a year, right away. The reason that I was spared is my grandmother told the Indian agent, well, if you think I'm too old to be watching my grandchildren, then I'm going to need my granddaughter to help me around the house, to help me with the housework. So I didn't go, but I did have my brother and 2 other brothers and another sister that went to Shubenacadie school. They're called survivors, but how do you survive the trauma that happened to you. Yes, they're not at that school anymore, but they still carry those memories. And so it's still painful to listen to the horror that they felt being taken from their families and put in a strange place, in a place where they didn't understand the language, in a place where the food they ate wasn't the same as our traditional food. And of course, not being able to communicate because our language was considered sinful and punishable, and this was under the guise of Christianity. And so I collected stories of some of our survivors, that finally left the school but still carried those memories and were afraid to speak their language because they thought they were going to be hit again or to be punished. So I always wonder, I don't know if the word survivor I know it's hope that we can survive and rise above all of that pain that they've endured, but it's also our responsibilities to guard against that happening again to any child. And so what we're doing here, this is what we ask people to do. After you've heard these stories from 3 residential school survivors, after you've witnessed some of the videos that we showcased, what is your heart telling you that's going to be your new reconcile action? What can you do as an individual to make sure that your attitude changes and that you walk the talk of that attitude? Yes, it's wonderful to wear. Thank you for wearing the orange shirts, but we want the action that goes with that shirt and making sure that no child is ever going to feel that they're not worthy enough to wear their hairs in braid. And we do a lot of braiding to tell our children that that was one of the things that was cut off were our children's braids. And so now we're using sweetgrass braids as a lesson of the sacredness of what braiding really means. And so what our children did at our school and all schools is we started to do uh, uh, making prayer ties, just teaching them how to put that fear of not being able to learn your language that happened to those children, that have been found is, and that this is what I do for my children. I do a pipe ceremony and I bless their feet. I'll get right on my knees and I'll say, take your shoes off. I'm going to bless your feet because I want you to have the right to play, to walk, to run, to dance, to journey, to climb for those ones who didn't get to do that. And so I blessed every child's feet and the teachers as well to make sure that what we do in the schools isn't going to be out of fear or out of, subjugation. And so we wanted to honor that. So we did a blessing of the feet, and I had the children then trace their feet, and we gave, we did 215 initially because that was the first count. And what I asked the children to do is I put kinship terms on the board, and I told them, I says, those children never got to go home and say, I'm home, mom. I'm home, dad. I'm home, older brother, older sister. I'm home, grandmother. I'm home, grandfather, auntie. So I asked them, let's put kinship terms on all the moccasins that we traced, and then we'll gift this language to the people outside of our community so they can start to learn our language. And why that's symbolic? And they did it with so much love. Why that's so symbolic is our earth walk is sacred. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that they would share their language. If you remember, Rita Joe, was a residential school survivor from Shubenacadie, and she wrote a poem called "You Took My Talk." You took my talk, and now I talk like you. I think like you. I create like you. I speak like you. And so I gently offer my hand, she says, so that you will talk like me, think like me, and create like me. And so that's what reconciliation can be. If you learn our words, you learn our language, you learn our, walk in our moccasins. That's always been an invitation that elders have said. Have you ever walked in the moccasins of an elder? Have you walked in the moccasins of a child? That's been told, oh, sorry, we can't wear those you can't wear those because they're not, proper. But this is what we're doing now is we're bringing all of that. So we took all those moccasins, all 215, and we took them to the churches. We wanted them on the altars of the churches. We wanted the churches and the parishioners who come to see this is what the church did in the past, but now they're trying to, do a forgiveness ceremony, and so the moccasins show make sure that there's a different earth walk now, and so that's one of the things that we did, and of course, we have uh, the orange shirts, orange ribbons, etc. And so we're trying to teach people the language. The other thing that we've been doing is when I wasn't allowed to use a blossom whiz and I had to use my English name, Imelda Mary, I wondered how can I heal those who didn't get to use their language either. So about 25 years ago, we started fasting in our territory. And in one of my fasting days, I had a vision where there was a sacred fire, and what I saw in front of the sacred fire were elders with blankets around them, and all of a sudden the elders stood up, and over the hill came children with blankets as well, but they had no faces. And so I tried to decipher what does that mean, and for me I realized they don't have an identity. So they need spirit names. And I started naming spirit names, starting with my own grandchildren. And now my grandchild is 25 years old, and he was actually brave enough to take his spirit name and make it his traditional name, Musquin, which means the breath of life. And so I started to do that with my grandchildren, then I started to do it with others. So to date, I've probably named over 250 children. And how we do it is at birth. I actually get to be that lucky elder that gets to witness birth because I do doula and I do labor coaching in the language. I sing songs to the babies before they're even born when they're inside their mother's womb so that they'll know that when they're born, they're going to hear their first language. And so I have a nickname in my territory, the baby whisperer, because those babies that I sang to while they were still in the womb still recognize my voice. And so it's so amazing. And I give them spirit names afterwards. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I was lucky enough to be raised in a community like that. So when we do our spirit naming in the community, I would do it traditionally around Mother's Day. And sometimes I would have 15 placentas to bury in the community. But we would start on Friday night, do a sweat lodge, bring the mothers and the aunties and the family into the sweat lodge to celebrate this new baby and bring the babies in too. And then on Saturday, I would gift them with the names around the sacred fire. And so everybody would hold the placenta before we bury it in its container and wrapped in cloth. And everybody would promise, as a member of this community, I'm going to teach this child how to hunt because I'm the best hunter. I'm the best fisherman. I'm the best cook. I'm the best singer. I'm the best carver, whatever things, but the whole community comes out and we promise the parents that we're going to help raise that child. then everybody says the name so that that child will never forget that he has a spirit name or she has a spirit name. And it's been amazing to witness that. I could see a book in my next retirement to write about the experience of how some of those spirit names come through ceremony. And so that's how it's been so amazing to continue to name. Right now I have 15 to name in October. I have more to name in December, entire families. So it's been a way, and why that spirit is important. It's you're nurturing that spirit, and reconciliation needs to understand and not tell our children that come to school, oh, I can't say that a blossom was, you're going to have to shorten that name, and there's always this complaint that our languages, our words are too long. But what people don't realize, our languages are holophrastic. So we have an entire phrase, in one word, like the one I shared, Bilui Dahazwausawagan. That's an entire phrase of saying changing of attitudes, to walk the talk towards truth. So all that is in that word. And so when we started naming trails in our territory here, I had a community member outside of my community say, well, I hope whatever you're going to name the trail, I hope it's short. I said, excuse me, sir, but if I can learn how to say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, I'm sure you can say Bilui Dahaz Wausawagan. So it's really important that we don't compromise our language to make it so anglicized that it doesn't carry its spirit, its strength, and that's what it needs. We need that new breath. Our languages need, our indigenous languages need a new breath of life. And that's why I'm happy to be able to use the language for the new births. And I'm also the one called in when somebody's passing, so that I can gift the language before somebody passes to the spirit world. In our school, we did yesterday, or on Wednesday rather, we did a sacred fire. And our school has 18-month-olds all the way to grade 6. So we had our sacred fire, and we did the sacred fire, and we had the males and the females all dressed in their regalia and skirts, and it was just beautiful to witness. And I had helpers. So what I did is I had the grade 4 student and grade 5 student, one female and one male, help me so I can guide them into this ceremony. So the little girls were on one side and the little boys were on the other side, all like a longhouse teaching. And the little girls had to pour from my copper cup a little bit of water to symbolize the tears of our people when they're still yearning and crying for their language, for their culture, for their wellness. And so we said, let's give Mother Earth a symbol of our tears. And then for the tears of the families whose children didn't get to come home, who didn't come to, get to learn their language, who didn't get to give grandchildren. And so all the little girls did that, and all the little boys offered the tobacco and cedar and sage into the fire to ignite the flame of hope that that every human will light their, light of hope, so that our children, and no child will ever go through what our children have went through and still going through, because we still have issues with language protection and cultural protection or cultural safety. And so they did that. But the surprising thing for the children was, we do spirit plates, and we do spirit plates to honor the ones who went before us. Normally I give blueberries to the fire or strawberries, depending on the season. Well, for the children, because it was in the spirit of all the children that have been found, we did candy. So I had Skittles and Sour Patch Kids. And you should have seen the little children going, how come you're putting candy in the fire? I said, because I want to teach you how to sacrifice. I know you want that, put that candy in your mouth, but instead we're going to give that candy up and give it to the children that didn't get to eat that candy, that didn't get to go home and taste what it's like. So let's sacrifice from us not eating it and putting it in the fire for the spirit of those children. Well, over 200 children proudly, without complaining, after I explained why we were doing it, put the candy into the fire. But I have to promise next week I'm bringing them candy. The other thing that was really symbolic is we had the lieutenant governor in our province wanted to raise the Every Child Matters flag. And I said, I'll bring one because it needs to be done in ceremony. So I asked the children in the circle, I said, there's a government house that wants to, fly our flag, but our flag needs love, because we have to give love to the people who out there who don't know our stories or have never heard them, but need to hear our stories. So let's send out love. So I had every child hug the flag. And so that I says, and when everybody gets to hug the flag, once it's up there, the wind will spread our love all over this province. And it'll go away to other people as they're crossing through our province, and it might go all the way out west to those families. So your love is needed, children, and I really need you to bless this flag. So they did that. And just picture a 2-year-old hugging this flag and giving its love, all the way to the grade 6. Then we took it to the lieutenant governors, and we made cedar, and we put cedar around the flagpole. We had we did we smudged it, and then we raised the flag, and then today it's flying half mast. So our children, when we talk about reconciliation, yes, policies have to change. Yes, the 94 calls to action are being called. But I think because the numbers are rising, there's that many more actions. 215 more actions need to be addressed. 6,505 and then some have to be addressed. That's what Biluwi Dahas Wawsawagan signifies, is that whole idea of why we need to stand in solidarity. Next week, I'm doing what we call a sacred circle of understanding, which some people call a medicine wheel. So the children right now are painting stones. Some are painting red to represent Indigenous people. Some are painting black to symbolize Black Lives Matter. Some are doing Asians to respect Asian lives, that they matter too. And then, of course, the white. So who needs the most understanding of why all peoples matter? And so we're going to be placing them in a medicine wheel format. And then we're going to do the orange stones in the middle to think about the ones who've went before us. And so we're going to be doing that in a ceremony, and then taking a picture of it, and then hoping other schools will do this so that we can teach our children what the sacredness of humanity is. How to be a good human is to be, respectful of all peoples. And so that we need to respect our languages. So French and English shouldn't be the only ones that are legislated. Our languages need to be legislated. Our languages need that support. So in our 94 calls to action and then some, that's one of the things I'm asking people to think about. How do I support the language that isn't protected? How do I support and ensure that it's okay for my non-Indigenous child to learn that language? I taught at Fredericton High School, and I had non-Indigenous high school students come into my class wanting to learn the language because they were dating an Indigenous, person, youth. But their teachers reprimanded them for leaving their classes to come and learn our language. So I found it offensive that the principal would say, well, they can't learn the language. That's your language and it's up to you. And I says, well, does that mean only English people will learn English and only French can take French? Why are why are my students limited, and have to choose between French or their indigenous language? That's a reconciliation that has to change. I know now why there's bilingualism. It's because of economic purposes. So why deny our indigenous children of learning French, English, and their language so they can be in that job market as well? So if you tell our youth, either take French or you take your indigenous language. I've argued maybe they don't want to learn English. Maybe they want to learn French and their indigenous language. Why is English so prominent and protected? Please protect our languages in the same way that you protect yours. And so I'm hoping in our province that we can change that policy, that everybody can take the language of their choice, and not make not make it, because it's only Indigenous children that have to choose one over the other. So that's an issue that needs to be reconciled. The other really important thing is I'm hoping to do is every school should know about treaties. I know out west you're so lucky and we're so envious here in the east of how you've been able to put treaty curriculum and treaty promises and all of that into your curriculum and into your province. We're just starting over here, and stuff to do that. And so I'm trying to develop a way to help teachers by celebrating Treaty Tuesday, Wabanaki Wednesday, and Treaty Thursday, which means on Tuesdays, one fact about our treaties in our territory will be over the intercom throughout every school, whether there's Indigenous children there or not, whether it's in French, English, or Wulastuk. And then on Wabanaki Wednesday, we want every school to learn something about us, learn a song, tell a story, learn a word. There's some schools already doing that. They're already, non-Indigenous schools are actually learning the language through my apps that I've developed. And so on Treaty Thursday, then it's the same thing. Oh, I learned 2 things this week about treaties, and it's coming from our own people. That way it doesn't put the pressure on the teachers who don't know anything about treaties, and so this way the calls to action are being acted upon because the entire school system is learning together so that we don't have them as adults. I never learned that in school. That was never taught to me. And so when we talk about language, all of our cultural knowledge is in our language, and we need to promote that language. One more really important thing, that I really wanted to talk about in our language is English objectifies. Our language doesn't. Our indigenous languages, we have relationships. When we say, the eagle is our brother, the river is our grandmother. Because it's true, we call grandfather sun, musums. We call grandmother moon, mother earth, father sky. In English, it's the sky, the moon, the sun, the earth. And so when our children learn English first before their own language, then they haven't learned the right relationship, the right way of knowing that those are our relatives. All of creation we're related to, not just humans. We're related to creation. And so we would be better stewards of our territory. Our rivers wouldn't be polluted. Our lands wouldn't be so, deficit of the right things to keep us healthy. Our air, our ancestral air wouldn't be polluted. So that's why our languages are needed, so we can teach every generation of being a good steward, being related to our Earth Mother, so that we don't abuse her by, by putting garbage on her, or abusing the water, by leaving pollutants in there. So there's a lot to be learned through our language, indigenous languages. And for me, that's the biggest reconciliation action anybody can take, is to learn. For a conservationist in Maine, we had a session last week and they said, what can we do? I said, all the trees that you're studying, learn them in the traditional language. Learn the territories, because so many territories have been renamed. They've been named after kings and queens and princes and etc., premiers, etc. We never do that to our territory. We give them the name that they do for us, Ekpahag, end of the tide, Jikuk, where the standing ones live. We have a way of naming our territory, but that was taken away. So please learn the name of the territory you are. Learn the name of the river. And I'm sure there's traditional names of every river, every lake, every forest, every place that's been, renamed. And that's one action I'm hoping people will take to start learning the language. And I just wanted to talk about how those prayer ties are so important. And so we've been hanging prayer ties in offices, of teaching students how to, you know, uh, make these prayer ties in silence, so that you can actually pray for the spirits of those children and the spirits of children yet to be born, so that when they go to school, whether they're Indigenous, Black, Asian, or white, may they be respected and honored for what they bring to the classroom. That gift of unity within diversity, that's what we have to strive for. And so our languages can guide you to there, to those places. I also wanted to share with you about how, the sea of orange that we saw yesterday, and hoping to continue in our territory here. I have a drone that's going to be going to all our communities, because we made prayer ties that surround an entire sweat lodge. The whole community, each family made prayer ties for the spirit of those children that never made it home, for residential school survivors. And of course, we have prayer poles, like a Sundance ceremony, where everybody's prayers in the community, were put on that. We've been doing sunset pipe ceremonies and sunrise pipe ceremonies. We still have sacred fires lit in our territory here. And of course, we're going to, traditional food is important. So besides the candy to the sacred fire, we made our traditional fry bread, and because traditional fry bread, moose meat, salmon, whatever our land gifts us, that's how we were able to sustain and remain in good health. But when reservations were, set up, then what happened is the government forgot to say, okay, this is Wulastuk territory. Salmon, you can only swim to Wulastuk territory because they depend on you for food. Well, the salmon got damned, and then of course the moose are now living on Crown land. And so our food source has been, compromised. And so now, unfortunately, some of us have to buy canned salmon instead of fresh salmon, because over here in the Atlantic, our Atlantic salmon clan is almost extinct, because too many dams and this different species of fish that are coming from other territories, from overseas, are affecting the livelihood of our salmon. So we do these ceremonies of the salmon. We do ceremonies for water. We do ceremonies for air. We do ceremonies for the four-leggeds and the winged ones, and even the insects. because we need those insects, we need those ants. And so that's what our languages tell us about all of those species that we live with, not not to exclude them. So I have I take lots of hides and things to my classroom, and I have a skunk cat. And I remember telling my grandson when he was 5 that I said, everybody is wearing eagle, bear, or moose, or wolf at the powwow. So no one's ever brought skunk. So I want you to wear, we're gonna honor Skunk Clan. And of course, my grandson was embarrassed and says, I don't want to wear that. Everybody's wearing this. Can I do that? I said, nope. That's okay then. I'm not going to force you. I'm going to put the skunk hat on because I'm going to honor the skunk clan. Grandmother Skunk will be happy that I'm representing her family at our powwow. So I started to wear it into the grand entry. And of course, my grandson changed his mind. So he put it on his head at 5 years old. And didn't the lead dancers come up and lift him up and look, skunk clan. We've never had a skunk clan come to our powwow. And they put him on his shoulders and they danced around the first dance, with the grass dancers. And ever since then, I think my grandson understood that we have to think about all of the animals, all of the four-leggeds, and respect them in the same way that eagle is respected. And so I take it to school just to take pictures on Wabanaki Wednesday or Wulastuk Wednesday for our children. They'll actually come and ask for it. Can I wear your abikjilo, your skunk? Can I wear your guaxus, your fox? Can I put your moccasins? So there's pride that's building, and this is what we need to nurture, is the pride that there's another word for, peace. There's another word for river. There's another word for life. There's another word for love, and it's in our language. And that's what we need to make sure that we're contributing to. And so I wanted to also talk about what happens in the city. Like unfortunately in our city, our premier didn't want to. He didn't want to close anything down, but some businesses did anyway, which we're grateful for. But the schools, most of the schools they learned the Wulastuk Song. And the Wulastuk Song is a tribute to the river that was renamed St. John. So non-Indigenous children actually learned the Wulastuk Song. And the Wulastuk Song is sung, we sing it in French, English, and of course in our Wulastuk way. It's also been translated in Inuktitut. It's also been sign languaged. And so we're still, we're sharing our song to ask for that singing. When we sing to our territory recognizes our languages. I'm not sure if I have enough time, but I wanted to share with you a story about how connected our languages are to our territory. When in 2010, Fredericton here on the East Coast was flooding, spring flood. My elder, of course, he's since passed. He called me in the middle of the night and he says, we need to go and talk to our great grandmother, Wulastuk. She's upset with us and we need to go let her know that we'll do ceremony. So I rushed from one community to another, normally because he was close to his 90s. And he was waiting for me outside. It was still dark. He was waiting for me outside. So one of the things I ended up doing is he just jumped into the car. Normally I help him into the car, but he had this energy of wanting to do ceremony in the middle of the night. So we go over to the Mactaquac Dam, and he said, I will stand up here on the knoll. I'll do my smudge, And he was dressed in full regalia, which I rarely see him in full regalia, but he was dressed in full regalia, even his headdress. He said, I want you to go down to the river and you tell our great grandmother River, we're sorry that we haven't been singing to her. We're sorry that we haven't been using our language as much because she doesn't hear our language and that's why she's upset with us. And so I went down there to the edge and I had my pipe, had my moccasins, and I'm filling my pipe in my language. And then he tells me, step in the language, Deb milk, Deb milk. So I stepped in the water and I was worried because it was really swift and going fast. And I was afraid to be swept into the flow of how fast the water was flowing. So I made sure I said, "What mo in Deb Melkin? You really want me to step in that water?" He said, "Yes, because our great grandmother has to feel your love." And so I said, "Okay." I stepped in and I remember how cold the water was. And I'm just kind of putting my feet and grounding myself in between the rocks so I wouldn't float away. And then did the other foot. I did my left one first, and then I did my right one. And then I lit my pipe. And in my language, I said, we're so sorry that our language is being attacked. We're so sorry that our language isn't being passed on. And I got so emotional because the water, it didn't completely stop flowing, but it wasn't rushing. It became gentle flow and it got warmer. And I couldn't help but feel the energy from our river, our beautiful great grandmother river. And I cried. I just knew what when elders say, we are land, we are water, we are air, air is us, land is us, and water is us. That's the beautiful feeling that our languages can give to us. And so I finished my pipe ceremony. I stepped out. Apparently, the sun was coming up. Somebody thought that it was another Indigenous person that was going to commit suicide. So somebody stopped and talked to my elder and said, "You want us to get her out of the water? Is she committing suicide?" And he says, "No, she's praying and appeasing our great grandmother Wulastuk to stop flooding." And so he said, "Oh my goodness, my people get sandbags. Your people pray. Thank you, sir." And so I got up and I was taking off my wet moccasins and going in the car. I saw these two big eagles coming at us. And I'm telling my elder, "Look, look." And of course, he's saying, "Let's go have breakfast." So he was going in the car. I was only 5 minutes away from his home where we did the ceremony. And he turned the radio on. And on the radio, it said, "Gemseg water is receding." He checks my hair, and then, he pokes me with his elbow and said, "See, our grandmother needs to hear her language. Our grandmother needs to hear, our songs. And our great grandmother needs to hear and do ceremony." So ever since then, we've been doing lots of ceremony. And the water did recede. And so we still continue to do these ceremonies and make sure that our land, especially the old trees in the forest, they know that language, they've heard it. And so they yearn to hear it again. So everybody can learn it. There's apps out there in the languages of your territory. We just unveiled a new one, my new one yesterday, as a gift to the ones who didn't make it home to learn their language. And so we launched a new app where you can hear the language, but also see the word that it's teaching you. And of course, giving you little quizzes so that you can test your own skills once you download the app. Um, uh, uh, it's called Wulastuk Wagan, but it's available on the web, but also it's not in the App Store yet, but we're working on it. So these are the wonderful, amazing things that language can do to promote the truth of how our languages can lead us through all those calls to action in health. Imagine when our elders are passing and they're sick, and I get to go to them with my bear fat, and I'll tell them, I need you to have the stamina of bear. Let me bless your feet. You know, you've lived you've walked 80 years or 90 years or 50 years, whatever it is. And I thank them for their earth walk that they've contributed, for being language carriers, for being, amazing elders and amazing earth walkers. And we do the same thing when children are sick. Matter of fact, I have bear fat at my office and at the school. And even if it's a little scratch, I'll have somebody say, I think I need your bear fat, they ask for it in the language. And so I like that they trust that bear can heal. And the reason bear heals is because sometimes all of us as two-leggeds, we carry lots of burdens. Even children carry burdens, believe it or not. And so what we do when we do our bear medicine is we take some of the bear fat and we put it on their heart if they're sad. We put it on their eyes if they don't see themselves in a good way. We put it behind their head so they can be better thinkers. And so what we do is we tell them sometimes as two-leggeds, our burdens are so heavy, we need to have four legs like the bear does. And the bear will teach us, how to carry those burdens, how to have the stamina to overcome our pain, how to be able to stand up again on two legs and make sure that we walk this path towards truth. And that's what the bear medicine does for us. We have forgiveness ceremonies. We have forgiveness ceremonies that we do, and we call that the wolf ceremony. And so as part of our reconciliation, you have to talk about forgiveness. There's people angry about, angry at the government, angry at the churches, angry at, the Indian agents, angry, and we can stay angry. We won't forget. But what we have to do is not to carry that burden in our hearts. Life is too short. I know, I'm a cancer survivor. And I always tell my children, like today in one of the classes, it was grade 1. And they were, being grade 1 on a Friday. And I says, you're making me raise my voice. I'm not used to raising my voice. And if I raise my voice, then I get out of breath. And I need you to help me save my breath so I can teach you. They calmed right down. And I said, thank you, for that, because we should never, I said, you should be coming to your language class. Remember those children that didn't get to learn theirs? The ones who were punished for theirs? They didn't get to come to school and learn their language. So you need to honor how special you are because you get to learn your language today. And trust me, that works. So if anybody else out there needs to calm children down in the classroom, and I always remind students, why do you think Creator gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth? 2 ears to be good listeners, to be good storytellers. Because if you talk while somebody else is talking, then you're not going to hear what they have to say. They can't hear what you have to say because you're both talking at the same time. Then you're going to miss the story. And you need to hear lots and lots of stories so that you can use your mouth to repeat those stories. And that's really important, to be a good storyteller. And so that's another trick that we use in our classrooms is to make sure that children become good listeners. Children become good earth walkers. We have a ceremony where we wear moccasins, and if we have like a pretend sweat lodge in our classroom. And so what we do is we have we just put a blanket on the floor, and we teach people how to come into the sweat lodge, how to humble themselves and go into, to go into the, to crawl before they, to crawl into the sweat lodge. And the reason we crawl is to teach us about being humble enough to remember that before we walked, we all crawled. And so we crawl into the sweat lodge, and we always crawl the side of our heart and we go to the left. And the eldest one usually is the one called in first. So I make my students are actually according to age. I have a couple sets of twins that I'm so lucky to have twins in my classrooms. And even the one twin that's 2 minutes older or 5 minutes older will know that she's going to go first or he's going to go first. And it's just respecting the way our language teaches us about honoring elders. So in our kinship terms, we have a title for older sister, Mrs., older brother, Hazes. And so what's really significant for that is the younger sibling is always one word, no seam is the younger sibling. So the fact that an older brother and an older sister have a title means that we have to respect them because they are important, because they've been given a title of being older sister, older brother. Same way with our, clans, our mother's side and our father's side. We have a different word for my mother's sister is my aunt, and she's Gises. But on my father's side, she's Nokum. So they're two different words. But that teaches me how I'm related to that aunt on my mother's side or my father's side. Very important to know both sides of where we come from. And our languages are just waiting to teach everybody. So I am I've been waiting for a note to make sure that we can wrap up now. I appreciate all the ears that are listening, all the minds that will remember what I said, all the eyes that can envision what word are you going to learn first, by the tree, by the bird, by the animal, by the territory. And may all our hearts reconcile with each other. Carry truth, everybody. Wuliwan.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. That was incredibly moving. I choked up a few times during that. And I wanted to just say also a big thank you to everyone who attended the session. And we really hope you enjoy the rest of the week. And thank you again so much.
You're welcome.